Dr. Kang stared at the massive structure floating in the darkness of space and felt his heart skip a beat. The research vessel Stellar Dawn had been traveling through the outer rim for 3 months looking for new forms of life when their scanners picked up this enormous station. It was bigger than anything he had ever seen before, and it was completely dark. Yoon moved closer to the viewing window and pressed her 6 fingers against the cold metal. She was the best xenobiologist in the Galactic Survey, and she had studied life forms from over 200 worlds, but this station made her feel very small. The structure was built from materials she did not recognize, and the design was unlike anything in their databases. Park joined them at the window with his usual excited expression. As their team archaeologist, he spent most of his time studying dead civilizations, but this looked very much alive to him. The station had clean lines and smooth surfaces that seemed to flow together like liquid metal. It was beautiful and terrifying at the same time. Lee was already working at his computer station running deep scans of the structure. His 4 eyes moved quickly across multiple screens as data flowed in. The station was approximately 50 kilometers long and 20 kilometers wide. It had dozens of levels and hundreds of rooms. Most interesting of all, it still had power running through its systems. Captain SEO brought the Stellar Dawn closer to the station and began looking for a docking port. She had been flying ships for over 30 years, and she had never seen anything like this. The station was clearly abandoned, but it showed no signs of damage from weapons or natural disasters. It looked like everyone had simply left one day. Dr. Kang called his team together for a briefing before they boarded the station. They would go in teams of 2 and stay in constant contact. They had no idea what species had built this place or why they had abandoned it. Safety was their most important concern. Yoon and Park would explore the upper levels while Kang and Lee checked the lower sections. They put on their environmental suits and grabbed their scanning equipment. The station might have atmosphere, but they could not take any chances with unknown alien air. The docking process was smooth, and their airlocks connected without any problems. The station system seemed to recognize their ship and automatically provided a safe connection. This suggested very advanced technology and possibly some kind of artificial intelligence still running the basic functions. They entered through a wide corridor that stretched far into the distance. Emergency lighting came on as they walked, and the air felt clean and fresh. Their suits detected a standard oxygen-nitrogen mixture that most species could breathe safely. Someone had designed this station to welcome visitors from many different worlds. The walls were covered with symbols and markings that none of them could read. The writing system was completely unknown and did not match anything in their translation databases. Park took many pictures and promised to study them later. Ancient languages were his specialty, and he loved a good puzzle. They found the first laboratory after walking for 10 minutes. The room was huge and filled with equipment that looked both familiar and strange. There were microscopes and analysis machines, but they were built with technology far beyond anything the Galactic Survey used. Everything was still powered and ready for use. Yoon went straight to the specimen storage units and began examining their contents. There were biological samples from dozens of different worlds, including some she recognized from her own research. But there were also samples from species she had never seen before. The collection was massive and very well organized. Lee discovered that the computer systems were still fully functional and began downloading their databases. The amount of information was enormous, and it would take months to study everything. But even his quick scan revealed something very interesting. Almost all the research seemed focused on one particular subject. Park found holographic projection equipment in the center of the laboratory and managed to activate it. The air above them suddenly filled with 3-dimensional images of strange creatures. They walked on 2 legs and had no fur or scales covering their skin. Their faces had forward-pointing eyes and small mouths with white teeth. Kang studied the holographic creatures with growing confusion. They looked somewhat familiar, but he could not place them in any known species classification. They were bipedal like many intelligent species, but their body structure was very unusual. They seemed both strong and fragile at the same time. The holograms showed the creatures in many different environments. Some lived in frozen wastelands while others thrived in burning deserts. They wore simple clothing made from plant and animal materials. Their tools were basic compared to galactic standard technology, but they used them in very creative ways. Yoon found research notes attached to each hologram and began reading them with great interest. The notes were written in the same unknown language they had seen on the walls, but the computer systems offered automatic translation. What she read made her very excited and very confused. The research notes called these creatures humans and described them as a legendary species that most scientists believed did not exist. The notes contained detailed studies of their biology and behavior, but also admitted that no living specimens had ever been captured or studied. All the information came from second-hand accounts and ancient stories. Park discovered more holographic records in a side chamber and called the others to see what he had found. These recordings showed an alien scientist working alone in the laboratory. The creature had gray skin and 4 arms and spoke in a language their computers could translate. The alien scientist introduced himself as Dr. Rim and explained that he had been studying humans for most of his adult life. He believed they were real despite what other scientists said about them. His research had taken him to dozens of worlds looking for proof that humans existed. Dr. Rim explained that humans were considered a myth by most galactic civilizations. Stories about them appeared in the folklore of many different species, but no one had ever made official contact with them. They were described as creatures who could survive anywhere and fight with incredible determination. The recordings showed Dr. Rim becoming more and more obsessed with his research over many years. He collected every story and legend about humans he could find. He analyzed genetic samples that might have come from them. He studied weapon fragments and tool remains that could have been made by human hands. Kang watched the recordings with growing fascination and concern. Dr. Rim seemed like a serious scientist, but his obsession with proving humans existed had clearly consumed his life. The research station was his life work, and he had built it specifically to study these mythical creatures. Lee discovered that the station databases contained information about hundreds of worlds and thousands of species. But everything was organized around the search for human evidence. Dr. Rim had created the most complete collection of human mythology in the known galaxy. Found biological analysis equipment that had been used to study genetic material supposedly from humans. The results were fascinating and impossible. The genetic code showed adaptation abilities that no known species possessed. It suggested creatures that could change their biology to survive in any environment. Park uncovered archaeological evidence from dozens of different worlds, showing traces of the same mysterious species. Tool marks in ancient stone, weapon fragments buried in old battlefields, cave paintings showing bipedal creatures with human features. The evidence was scattered but consistent. The team spent hours exploring the first laboratory and realized they had only seen a tiny part of the station. There were dozens more research areas and living quarters and storage facilities. Dr. Rim had built a complete research facility dedicated to studying one mythical species. As they prepared to explore more of the station, Kang felt a strange feeling growing in his mind. The evidence they were seeing suggested that humans might be more than just myths and legends. Dr. Rim had collected too much information and too many consistent reports for it all to be fantasy. Captain Asio contacted them from the ship to check on their progress and remind them to stay safe. They had been on the station for 6 hours and had barely begun to explore it. She warned them that their supplies would only last for 3 days and they needed to make the most of their time. The team decided to set up a temporary base in the main laboratory so they could work more efficiently. The station provided comfortable, living conditions and they could access all of Dr. Rim research from this central location. They were going to need much more time to understand what they had discovered. Dr. Kang looked around the laboratory filled with evidence of Dr. Rim obsession and wondered what they would find in the deeper parts of the station. The first day had already shown them enough impossible things to challenge everything they thought they knew about galactic history. Somewhere in this massive research facility were the answers to questions they had never thought to ask. Dr. Rim had spent his life trying to prove that humans existed, and now his research was their responsibility. They were about to learn whether humans were myth or reality. The second day on Dr. Rim Research Station brought discoveries that made the team question everything they knew about galactic history. Yoon woke up early and went straight to the genetic analysis equipment she had found the day before. The samples, stored in the laboratory freezers, contained DNA unlike anything in the known scientific databases. She ran the genetic material through every test she could think of, and the results were impossible to explain. The DNA showed signs of rapid adaptation that should not exist in nature. Most species evolved slowly over millions of years, but this genetic code suggested a species that could change within a single lifetime. The human DNA samples contained backup systems and redundant pathways that would allow incredible healing abilities. Yoon had studied regeneration in dozens of species, but nothing came close to what these genetic patterns suggested. Humans could potentially recover from injuries that would kill most other creatures. Park spent the morning in the archaeological database and found evidence that made his hands shake with excitement. Dr. Rim had collected artifact reports from over 300 different worlds, and the pattern was undeniable. The same mysterious species had left traces across the entire galaxy. The tool marks were always consistent, showing the use of opposable thumbs and bipedal stance. The weapon fragments were made from primitive materials, but showed advanced metallurgy techniques. Most interesting were the cave paintings and rock carvings that appeared on worlds separated by thousands of light years. Every artistic representation showed the same creature type, with the same basic body structure: forward-facing eyes, minimal body hair, complex hand structure, and upright walking posture. The artistic styles were different because they came from different alien cultures, but the subjects were always identical. Lee discovered that Dr. Rim had somehow gained access to military archives from dozens of different civilizations. The battle reports made for very disturbing reading because they described encounters with an unknown enemy that seemed to break all the rules of warfare. The reports came from different time periods spanning over 10,000 years, but they all described similar encounters. Small groups of bipedal creatures armed with primitive weapons would appear during major conflicts. They fought with tactics that made no sense and refused to surrender, even when facing certain death. What made the reports truly frightening was that these primitive fighters often won against technologically superior forces. They used unpredictable strategies and seemed to have no regard for their own safety. Many reports described them fighting with injuries that should have been fatal. Captain SEO contacted them from the ship with news that their deep space scanners had detected something unusual. Several other ships were approaching their location from different directions. The vessels were using stealth technology, but their movement patterns suggested they were very interested in the research station. Dr. Kang decided to increase security and ordered his team to work in pairs at all times. They still had 2 more days to explore the station, but they might have unexpected visitors soon. The approaching ships could be pirates or salvagers or something much worse. Yoon moved to a different laboratory that specialized in behavioral analysis and found recordings that changed her understanding of human mythology completely. Dr. Rim had collected thousands of hours of survivor testimony from across the galaxy, and the stories were remarkably consistent. Survivors from different species and different time periods all described the same basic human characteristics. They were shorter than most galactic species but much stronger than their size suggested. They moved quickly and quietly and seemed to appear from nowhere during battles. The most common description was that humans fought with controlled rage that was both terrifying and inspiring. They would protect weaker species with incredible determination, but showed no mercy to those who threatened innocent life. Many survivors said humans seemed to enjoy fighting against impossible odds. Park discovered architectural evidence that proved humans had visited advanced civilizations without making official contact. Building sites across the galaxy showed modifications that could only have been made by creatures with human body structure and tool use patterns. The modifications were always helpful improvements that made buildings safer or more efficient. Someone with human characteristics had been quietly helping other species solve engineering problems without taking credit or asking for payment. The pattern suggested a species that preferred to remain hidden. Lee found communication records that made the team realize how extensive Dr. Rim research network had been. He had contacts on hundreds of worlds who sent him reports about unusual encounters and unexplained phenomena. Most of his sources were scientists and military officers who trusted him to keep their identities secret. The reports described encounters with humans in every type of environment imaginable. They had been seen in the frozen moons of gas giants and the burning surfaces of desert worlds. They appeared in the depths of ocean planets and the thin atmospheres of mountain worlds. What amazed Lee was that humans seemed to thrive in all these environments without advanced technology. They used simple tools and basic clothing, but survived in conditions that would kill most galactic species. Their adaptation abilities were beyond anything science could explain. Yoon discovered medical records that proved humans had been secretly helping other species for thousands of years. Hospital databases contained reports of mysterious patients who appeared during medical emergencies and provided assistance that saved thousands of lives. The patients always left before they could be properly identified, but they left behind medical knowledge that advanced treatment techniques by decades. They seemed to understand the biology of species they had never officially encountered and could perform surgical procedures that amazed trained doctors. Park found evidence that humans had been involved in preventing several galactic disasters without anyone realizing it. Natural catastrophes that should have destroyed entire civilizations were mysteriously avoided at the last moment, through small changes that seemed like lucky coincidences. Asteroid impacts were diverted by tiny course corrections that appeared to be natural. Plague outbreaks ended suddenly when new treatments appeared from unknown sources. Wars were prevented when key leaders had changes of heart that their own advisors could not explain. The pattern suggested that humans were actively protecting galactic civilization while remaining completely hidden from official recognition. They intervened only when absolutely necessary, and always in ways that left no trace of their involvement. Lee discovered that Dr. Rim had been in communication with someone who might have been an actual human. The message log showed a conversation partner who knew impossible amounts of information about human biology and culture, but never revealed their identity. The mysterious contact had warned Dr. Rim that his research was becoming dangerous and that he should consider destroying his evidence. They explained that knowledge of human existence could destabilize galactic politics in ways that would harm everyone. Dr. Rim had refused to abandon his research and argued that scientific truth was more important than political stability. The conversation logs showed growing tension between the two as Dr. Rim became more determined to prove humans existed. The team spent the day reviewing evidence that painted a picture of humans as secret guardians of galactic civilization. They had the technology and ability to conquer other species, but instead chose to protect them from behind the scenes. Captain SEO reported that the approaching ships had stopped just outside scanner range and seemed to be waiting for something. Their stealth technology was more advanced than anything in the Galactic Survey databases, which suggested they belonged to a very sophisticated civilization. Dr. Kang called his team together to discuss what they had learned and what they should do next. The evidence for human existence was overwhelming, but the implications were staggering. If humans were real and had been secretly influencing galactic history, then everything they thought they knew was wrong. Yoon believed they had a responsibility to share their discoveries with the scientific community, regardless of the political consequences. The genetic evidence alone would revolutionize their understanding of biological adaptation and could lead to medical breakthroughs that would save millions of lives. Park wanted to continue exploring the station and finding more archaeological proof before making any decisions. The evidence they had found was amazing, but they needed to understand the complete picture before revealing anything to the outside galaxy. Lee was worried about the approaching ships and thought they should leave immediately with whatever evidence they could carry. The mysterious vessels might belong to humans who wanted to keep their existence secret and would do anything to protect that secret. Dr. Kang realized they were facing a decision that could change the course of galactic history. Dr. Rim had spent his life trying to prove humans existed, and now they had the evidence he had died looking for. But they also had to consider whether revealing that evidence would help or harm the Galaxy-A's. Night fell on the research station. The team prepared to explore the deeper levels where Dr. Rim had kept his most sensitive research. Tomorrow, they would find out whether humans were just highly advanced survivors or something much more significant. The third day on the research station brought the team face to face with Dr. Rim's personal obsession through his private recordings and personal quarters. Yoon discovered the entrance to his living area hidden behind a false wall in the main laboratory, and what they found inside revealed a mind consumed by the search for truth. Dr. Rim's personal quarters were filled with thousands of artifacts and images related to human mythology from across the galaxy. Every wall was covered with paintings and sculptures and photographs showing the same bipedal creatures in different artistic styles. His dedication to studying humans had clearly taken over every aspect of his life. Park found Dr. Rim personal journals written in his native language and began the slow process of translation. The entries spanned over 40 years and showed a brilliant scientist slowly becoming isolated from his colleagues and his own species, as his research led him down paths that others refused to follow. The early journal entries were filled with excitement about discovering human legends during his regular xenobiological research. Dr. Rim had been studying adaptation patterns in extreme environments when he first encountered stories about creatures who could survive anywhere without advanced technology. Young Dr. Rim had initially dismissed human stories as folklore, but he kept finding similar accounts on world after world. The descriptions were too consistent and too detailed to be simple fantasy. Something had inspired these stories, and he became determined to find out what that something was. Lee accessed Dr. Rim research correspondence and found hundreds of messages from colleagues warning him that his human research was damaging his scientific reputation. The Galactic Biological Council had issued several formal complaints about his use of resources and equipment for studying mythical creatures. Dr. Rim's responses to his critics showed a scientist who believed he had discovered something too important to abandon despite the personal cost. He argued that dismissing human evidence without proper investigation was unscientific and dangerous to their understanding of galactic history. Yoon found video recordings of Dr. Rim presenting his early human research to scientific conferences, and the reactions were painful to watch. His colleagues laughed at his evidence and mocked his conclusions. Several prominent scientists accused him of wasting grant money on fantasy research. The recordings showed Dr. Rim becoming more defensive and isolated as the scientific community turned against him. His presentations became more desperate as he tried to convince others that the evidence was real and important. The final conference video showed him being forcibly removed from the stage park, discovered that Dr. Rim's own species, the scholarly Vek, had eventually disowned him for his human research. The Vek were known throughout the galaxy for their scientific achievements, and they considered Dr. Rim's obsession with myths to be an embarrassment to their entire civilization. The formal censure documents from the Vek Scientific Assembly were harsh and final. They stripped Dr. Rim of his academic titles and banned him from using Vek research facilities. His own people had decided that his work was worthless, and his reputation was destroyed. Lee found financial records showing how Dr. Rim had used his personal fortune to build the research station after being cast out by the scientific community. He had spent everything he owned creating a facility where he could continue his human research without interference from others. The construction logs showed that Dr. Rim had worked alone for over 10 years, building and equipping the station. He had used automated systems and hired contractors from different species to avoid revealing his true purpose. The station was his final attempt to prove his life work. Had Meaning Yoon discovered Dr. Rim's personal laboratory, where he had continued his research in complete isolation. The room was filled with analysis equipment that he had built himself using techniques that were decades ahead of standard galactic technology. His dedication had driven him to make incredible scientific advances. The most disturbing find was Dr. Rim's collection of personal items that had supposedly belonged to humans. He had spent vast amounts of money acquiring clothing fragments and tool pieces and genetic samples from black market dealers across the Galaxy Park. Realized that Dr. Rim had been the target of numerous scams and frauds, as word spread about his willingness to pay for human artifacts. Many of the items in his collection were obvious fakes made by criminals who took advantage of his desperation to find proof, but mixed in with the fake artifacts were items that defied explanation. Tool fragments made from materials that did not exist in any galactic database. Clothing fibers that showed weaving techniques unknown to any civilization. Genetic samples that contained impossible DNA sequences. Lee found Dr. Rim's personal communications with family members who had tried to convince him to abandon his research and return to normal scientific work. The messages showed a man who had sacrificed relationships and happiness in pursuit of what others considered an impossible dream. Dr. Rim's sister had written dozens of letters begging him to give up his human research and come home to Vec Prime where he could rebuild his career. She reminded him that he had been a respected scientist before his obsession destroyed his life. His former students had sent messages expressing concern about his mental health and offering to help him find treatment for what they considered a dangerous fixation. They could not understand how their brilliant teacher had become consumed by mythology. The most painful messages came from Dr. Rim's former research partner who had been forced to end their professional relationship when the human research made it impossible for her to maintain her own scientific credibility. She had loved him but could not follow him into what she saw as madness. Yoon discovered that Dr. Rim had made contact with underground networks of beings who claimed to have encountered humans. These groups existed on the fringes of galactic society and were generally considered to be composed of conspiracy theorists and attention seekers. But Dr. Rim's correspondence with these contacts revealed information that was surprisingly detailed and consistent. Many of the people who claimed human encounters were former military officers and emergency responders who had no reason to lie about their experiences. Park found evidence that Dr. Rim had traveled to over 100 worlds, investigating reported human sightings and encounters. He had spent decades following leads and interviewing witnesses and collecting physical evidence that mainstream science refused to acknowledge. The travel logs showed a man who had become increasingly isolated as his research took him further from civilized space. He had visited worlds on the outer rim where strange things happened, and official records were incomplete or missing entirely. Lee discovered that Dr. Rim had been secretly funded by several anonymous benefactors who believed his research was important, even if they could not publicly support it. The funding had allowed him to continue his work long after his official career ended. The benefactors had provided equipment and materials and access to restricted databases that would have been impossible for Dr. Rim to obtain on his own. Someone with significant resources and influence had wanted his research to continue. Yoon found Dr. Rim's final research breakthrough hidden in encrypted files that took Lee hours to decode. 3 years ago, Dr. Rim had made contact with someone who claimed to be an actual human, and the conversations that followed changed everything. The contact had reached out to Dr. Rim through secure channels and provided information that proved they understood human biology and culture in ways that no imposter could fake. They had answered questions that Dr. Rim had spent decades trying to resolve, but the contact had also warned Dr. Rim that his research was becoming dangerous and that there were powerful forces who would do anything to keep human existence secret. They had begged him to destroy his evidence and abandon his research station. Dr. Rim had refused to give up his life work, even when faced with threats to his safety. The final conversation logs showed him arguing with the contact about his responsibility to share scientific truth with the galaxy regardless of the consequences. The contact had explained that revealing human existence would cause panic and political upheaval that could destroy the peace that had existed between species for thousands of years. Some civilizations would worship humans as gods, while others would hunt them as threats. Dr. Rim had maintained that hiding scientific truth was a greater crime than any political disruption it might cause. He believed that the galaxy deserved to know that humans were real and had been protecting them without recognition or reward. The team spent the day reading through Dr. Rim's personal files and realized they were seeing the complete destruction of a brilliant mind by an obsession that had consumed his entire life. But they also realized that his obsession might have been completely justified. As evening fell on the research station, Captain Seo reported that the mysterious ships had moved closer and were now actively scanning the station. Their technology was so advanced that the stellar dawn shields and sensors could barely detect their presence. Dr. Kang gathered his team to discuss what they had learned about Dr. Rim and what it meant for their own situation. They had found a man who had sacrificed everything to prove that humans existed and had apparently succeeded just before his death. The evidence suggested that Dr. Rim had been in contact with actual humans who had tried to convince him to abandon his. Lee worked through the night breaking the encryption on Dr. Rim's central database, and what he found changed everything the team thought they knew about galactic history. The files contained evidence that humans were not only real, but had been actively shaping the development of every major civilization for thousands of years. The database revealed a pattern of intervention that spanned millennia, with humans appearing at crucial moments to prevent disasters that would have destroyed entire species. They had worked in secret using advanced technology and careful planning to guide galactic civilization without revealing their presence. Yoon studied the biological data that Dr. Rim had collected about human intervention in plague outbreaks across dozens of worlds. Every major disease that had threatened to wipe out a species had mysteriously ended just before reaching critical levels. The timing was too perfect to be coincidence. The medical records showed that new treatments and cures had appeared from unknown sources during every plague emergency. Anonymous scientists would submit research data to medical facilities and then disappear before they could be questioned about their methods or identities. Park found archaeological evidence proving that humans had prevented several species from developing weapons that would have led to their self-destruction. Nuclear programs had failed due to unexpected technical problems. Biological weapons research had been mysteriously sabotaged before completion. The pattern showed that humans allowed species to develop advanced technology at their own pace, but intervened when that technology threatened to cause extinction-level events. They had been acting as invisible guardians, preventing civilizations from destroying themselves. Lee discovered military records that revealed human involvement in major wars throughout galactic history. Small groups of unknown fighters had appeared during conflicts that threatened to destroy entire species and had changed the outcomes through precise interventions. The humans never fought for conquest or territory, but only to prevent genocide and protect innocent populations. They would appear during the darkest moments of wars and disappear once the immediate threat was resolved. Leaving no trace of their involvement, Yoon found genetic analysis proving that humans had been living among other species in disguise for thousands of years. The technology they used for biological camouflage was centuries ahead of anything known to galactic science, but left traces that Dr. Rim had learned to identify. Some of the most respected leaders and scientists in galactic history had been humans, using advanced biotechnology to appear as members of other species. They had guided important decisions and prevented catastrophes while maintaining perfect disguises. Park discovered that several natural disasters that had saved civilizations from extinction had actually been human interventions disguised as random events. Asteroid impacts that prevented wars, volcanic eruptions that ended plagues, solar flares that disrupted dangerous experiments. The humans had access to technology that allowed them to manipulate natural forces with incredible precision. They could cause or prevent disasters that appeared completely natural, while actually being carefully planned interventions designed to protect developing civilizations. Lee found communication logs showing that humans had been monitoring every aspect of galactic development through observation posts and hidden agents placed throughout known space. Their surveillance network was more extensive than all official intelligence agencies combined. The monitoring system allowed humans to predict threats to galactic stability years before they became critical. They used this advance warning to plan interventions that would prevent disasters without revealing their involvement to the species they were protecting. Yoon made the most shocking discovery when she found genetic records proving that humans had been guiding the evolution of other species through careful manipulation of environmental factors. They had influenced which species developed intelligence and which remained in primitive states. The evolutionary guidance had prevented the development of species that would have been naturally aggressive and expansionist. Humans had quietly eliminated potential threats to galactic peace before they could become problems for other civilizations. Park found evidence that humans had been responsible for the discovery of faster-than-light travel and other crucial technologies that allowed galactic civilization to flourish. Anonymous scientists had provided key research breakthroughs at exactly the right moments in history. The technology transfers had been carefully timed to prevent any single species from gaining too much advantage over others. Humans had maintained a balance of power that kept peace between civilizations, while allowing steady progress for everyone. Lee discovered that the current Galactic Council structure had been designed by humans and implemented through their disguised agents over several centuries. The political system that maintained peace between dozens of species was actually a human creation. The council members believed they had developed the system themselves through natural political evolution, but the real architects had been human advisors who had guided every major decision while remaining completely invisible. Yoon found medical records proving that humans had been secretly providing healthcare to other species for thousands of years. Mysterious doctors had appeared during medical emergencies and performed procedures that saved lives before disappearing without explanation. The human medical knowledge was centuries ahead of official galactic science, and they had prevented countless deaths through their interventions. They had also guided medical research by providing anonymous data that led to important breakthroughs. Park discovered that human culture and philosophy had influenced the development of ethics and morality throughout galactic civilization. The values that most species considered natural had actually been carefully introduced through literature and art, created by disguised humans. The cultural interventions had prevented the development of societies based on conquest and exploitation. Humans had promoted cooperation and mutual respect between species while remaining hidden from those they were influencing. Lee found financial records showing that humans had prevented several economic collapses that would have destabilized galactic civilization. They had used their advanced understanding of economics to manipulate markets and prevent disasters. The economic interventions had been so subtle that the species involved never realized they had been helped. Humans had prevented wars that would have started over resource conflicts and guided trade agreements that benefited everyone. Yoon discovered that humans had been studying every species in the galaxy for thousands of years and had compiled detailed databases about their biology and psychology. They understood other species better than those species understood themselves. The knowledge had allowed humans to predict how different species would react to various situations and plan interventions accordingly. They had prevented conflicts by understanding exactly how to influence the decision-making processes of other civilizations. Park found evidence that humans had been protecting the galaxy from external threats that other species never knew existed. They had fought off invasions from outside the galaxy and prevented the spread of dangerous technologies from unknown sources. The external threats had been serious enough to potentially destroy all galactic civilization, but humans had dealt with them in complete secrecy. No other species ever knew how close they had come to extinction, or who had saved them. Lee discovered communication logs between Dr. Rim and a human operative who had finally decided to make direct contact after years of monitoring his research. The conversations revealed that humans had been watching Dr. Rim for decades. The human operative had tried to convince Dr. Rim to abandon his research by explaining that knowledge of human existence would cause more harm than good. They had offered him other research opportunities and even threatened him. When he refused to stop, Dr. Rim had argued that scientific truth was more important than political stability and had refused all attempts to make him give up his life work. The human operative had eventually given up trying to convince him and had disappeared from communication. Yoon found Dr. Rim final research files that contained detailed plans for revealing human existence to the galaxy through a carefully planned announcement. He had intended to present his evidence to the Galactic Science Council, despite the warnings he had received. The presentation would have included genetic proof of human existence and documented evidence of their interventions throughout history. Dr. Rim believed that other species deserved to know the truth about their secret protectors. Park discovered that Dr. Rim had died just days before his planned announcement to the galactic scientific community. The medical records showed natural causes, but the timing seemed suspicious given everything they had learned. Lee found a message that Dr. Rim had recorded just before his death, explaining his decision to reveal human existence despite the potential consequences. He had believed that hiding the truth was a greater crime than any disruption it might cause. The message revealed that Dr. Rim had been contacted by multiple human operatives who had tried to convince him to destroy his research. They had explained that revealing human existence would destabilize galactic politics and potentially lead to wars. Dr. Rim had refused their arguments and had maintained that the galaxy deserved to know about the species that had been secretly protecting them. For thousands of Dr. Kang led his team through the deepest sections of the research station following directions from Dr. Rim personal files, while the human ships maintained their threatening positions outside. They needed to find Dr. Rim final recordings before deciding what to do with his life work. The corridors in the lower levels were narrower and darker than the upper sections, and the air felt heavy with the weight of secrets. Emergency lighting cast strange shadows on the walls as they walked deeper into the station, where Dr. Rim had spent his final years. Yoon found the entrance to Dr. Rim private quarters, hidden behind multiple security doors that required Lee several hours to bypass. The room beyond was small and simple, containing only basic furniture and personal items that showed how isolated Dr. Rim had become. Park discovered that the walls were covered with photographs of Dr. Rim's family and colleagues from his early career, before his human research destroyed his relationships. The images showed a younger scientist surrounded by friends who had eventually abandoned him. Lee activated the computer system in Dr. Rim's personal workspace and found thousands of hours of video recordings that documented his final years of research. The recordings showed a man who had become increasingly convinced that he was close to making contact with actual humans. The early recordings showed Dr. Rim working alone in his laboratory, analyzing samples and reviewing evidence with the enthusiasm of a scientist on the verge of a major breakthrough. He spoke to the camera as if addressing future viewers who would understand his work. Yoon watched recordings that showed Dr. Rim's excitement when he first made contact with someone claiming to be human. The conversations had started through encrypted messages and had gradually developed into regular communications over several months. The human contact had provided information that proved they understood human biology and culture in ways that no imposter could fake. They had answered questions about human society and technology that Dr. Rim had spent decades trying to understand. Park found recordings showing Dr. Rim growing frustration as the human contact tried to convince him to abandon his research. The conversations became increasingly tense as Dr. Rim refused to destroy evidence that had taken him 40 years to collect. The human contact had explained that revealing human existence would cause chaos throughout galactic civilization as species struggled to understand their true place in the universe. Some would worship humans while others would hunt them, and most would demand protection. Dr. Rim had argued that hiding scientific truth was morally wrong, regardless of the political consequences. He believed that other species deserved to know about the beings who had been secretly protecting them for thousands of years. Lee discovered the final series of recordings that Dr. Rim had made just days before his death. The videos showed a man who had made peace with his decision to reveal human existence despite the warnings and threats he had received. Dr. Rim spoke directly to the camera, with the calm certainty of someone who knew his time was ending. He had prepared a message for whoever would eventually find his research and decide what to do with the knowledge he had gathered. The team gathered around the main screen as Dr. Rim's final recording began to play automatically. His image appeared looking directly at them with eyes that held both sadness and determination as he prepared to deliver his ultimate revelation. Dr. Rim's final message began with a formal introduction, as if he were presenting his research to the Galactic Science Council. He stated his name and credentials and explained that he had spent 37 years proving that humans were not mythical creatures. The recording showed Dr. Rim standing in his laboratory surrounded by the evidence he had collected over decades of research. He gestured to genetic samples and artifacts and computer databases as he explained what each piece proved about human existence. Dr. Rim's voice was steady and professional as he explained that humans were real and had been living among other species for thousands of years. They possessed technology that allowed them to disguise themselves perfectly and had been guiding galactic development from the shadows. The most shocking revelation was that humans had been preventing disasters and wars and extinctions throughout galactic history while allowing other species to believe they were responsible for their own survival and progress. Dr. Rim explained that humans had asked him to destroy his research because knowledge of their existence would destabilize the political systems they had carefully created to maintain peace between species. He had refused their request because he believed that scientific truth was more important than political stability. Dr. Rim had spent his entire career fighting for the principle that knowledge should never be hidden, regardless of its consequences. The recording showed Dr. Rim becoming more emotional as he explained his final decision to reveal human existence to the galaxy. He had weighed the potential for chaos against the moral obligation to share truth, and had chosen truth. Dr. Rim spoke directly to whoever would find his research and warned them that they would face the same choice he had faced. They could destroy the evidence to maintain the status quo or reveal it and change galactic civilization forever. The most powerful moment came when Dr. Rim explained that his contact with humans had convinced him that they were not seeking to rule other species but were trying to guide them toward independence and self-sufficiency. Humans did not want to be gods or rulers, but preferred to remain as hidden guardians who intervened only when absolutely necessary to prevent extinction-level disasters. They had been preparing other species to eventually protect themselves. Dr. Rim's final words were delivered, with the calm certainty of someone who had found the truth he had spent his life seeking. He looked directly into the camera and spoke his legendary last words with quiet dignity. He explained that humans existed not as conquerors or gods, but as reluctant protectors who had taken responsibility for guiding younger species toward maturity and independence. They had remained hidden because being known would prevent other species from growing. Dr. Rim concluded that some truths were too powerful to remain secret regardless of the consequences of revealing them. He had chosen to preserve his research because future generations deserved to know about the beings who had protected them. The recording ended with Dr. Rim explaining that he was dying of natural causes, but was at peace with his decision to document human existence. He had left his research as a gift to future scientists who would have to decide what to do with dangerous knowledge. As the final recording ended, Captain CO contacted them with urgent news that the human ships were powering up their weapons and demanding immediate surrender of all research materials. The team had minutes to decide what to do with Dr. Rim's life work. Dr. Kang realized they were facing the same choice that had consumed Dr. Rim's final years. They could surrender the evidence and allow humans to remain hidden, or try to preserve it, and risk confrontation with beings who had shaped galactic history. Yoon argued that they had a scientific obligation to preserve Dr. Rim's research, regardless of the political consequences. The genetic evidence alone could revolutionize medicine and save millions of lives across dozens of species. Park wanted to find a compromise that would protect both the evidence and galactic stability. He suggested they could study the research privately without making public announcements until they better understood the implications. Lee was convinced that the human ships would destroy the station rather than allow the evidence to leave and argued for immediate surrender. He believed that fighting beings with such advanced technology would be suicide. The team stood in Dr. Rim's laboratory surrounded by 40 years of research that proved the existence of the most mysterious species in galactic mythology. Outside, the human ships waited for their decision with weapons ready. Dr. Kang looked around at the evidence that had cost Dr. Rim everything and realized that they were about to discover whether humans were truly the benevolent guardians that Dr. Rim believed them to be. The choice they made in the next few minutes would determine whether Dr. Rim's sacrifice had meaning, or whether his research would disappear forever into the darkness of space where it had been created. As alarms began sounding throughout the station, the team prepared to face the species that had remained hidden for thousands of years, while secretly protecting every civilization in the galaxy from threats they never knew existed.